Hello, Anna.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good, I'm good, thank you. Welcome. So you started your career as an actor. You originally trained at the Central School of Speech and Drama, and then you have moved on to performance coaching, predominantly in the creative industry. So whether it's directors, actors, producers, and you also do corporate clients as well. Mm-hmm. You've trained in NLP as well as other methodologies and practices. And people pay a lot of money to be coached by you now, don't they?
Yes.
Yes. And
some people, yeah.
Your testimonials are extraordinary as well.
Thank you.
So how do you go, firstly, from acting to performance coach?
It's funny for me because I understand the question because it looks like completely different things. But actually, I think for me, in essence, I'm still doing the same thing that I was doing when I was acting. It just looks incredibly different. So I've always had a real fascination with how we function. And I think I can trace that back to when I was 7 years old. I'll just share this little story. When I was 7 years old, I said to my dad was a linguist, and I said, when I have my mouth closed, how is it that I can still hear my own voice? And
at 7 years old, you were already thinking that?
Yeah. And my dad was a little flummoxed and didn't know what to say. And my mum, who was there, turned to him and said, she's talking about thinking. She wants to know how she's thinking. My dad said, I know what she's talking about. I just don't know. I don't have an answer for that. And I think for me, that was quite a poignant moment in my life, because there was two things. I was genuinely fascinated. It seemed quite magical what was occurring internally, and it does seem really magical still to me, this like how we think. But also it was that sense of these two people in my life who I saw as the voice of authority, guiding me, teaching me, doing incredibly well in that job. They didn't have an answer for this question. And so I think it was like an understanding that there are mysteries in life. And that's always kind of propelled me forward, this sense of the mysterious. And so I've kind of embarked on this journey ever since then. And I think it's a lifelong journey for me of just understanding how we function at a deeper level. And within that, I discovered that my real passion is transformation from the inside out. So that initially took me to being an actor, because it was all about kind of, how do I actually transform myself into another person? And then this has kind of like evolved beyond that, which is me enabling other people to transform themselves from the inside out. So that's why I say the essence for me is I'm still doing the very same thing that I was doing back then. It's just the mask or the external looks very different.
Can you summarize for me what performance coaching is? I think a lot of people have perhaps heard of it, but they don't really understand exactly what it is.
It's really about kind of looking at yourself, how you're seeing the world, and by that I mean if we consider the mind, if I'm going to use a metaphor of a map. So if you consider the mind as a mental map, this is how we what we're believing to be true about the world, about ourselves, about our place in the world, forms this kind of navigational system. And so performance coaching, I tend to just use the word coaching now, to be honest, but the sense of performance coaching is really about a deeper understanding of your own mental map, how you're structuring your thinking, and being able to really kind of refine what it is you're doing that's already working for you, and also what it is that you're doing that's not really working. So it's a little bit like cutting those parts of the map out, or dissolving those kind of belief systems. And so I guess the performance bit really comes in terms of being able to do what you do at a higher level. But for me, there's an equation which was I gained from a friend of mine, a man called James Tripp. He offered this equation: be, do, have. And most people tend to focus on what do I need to do in this world in order to achieve what it is I want to achieve. Whereas I think there's quite a fundamental foundational piece before that, which is the being bit. Who do I need to be in order to do the thing that I want to do, in order to achieve what it is I want to achieve. So in terms of the work that I do and the coaching I do is always centered on the being. Who are you being in this world? Who do you need to evolve into? Who do you need to become in order to do whatever it is you want to do, again, to achieve the results that you want to achieve? So essentially, in a nutshell, that's kind of like the essence of the work that I'm doing. It's like a very core, like really, really deep inquiry into the question, who am I?
I mean, it's almost like programming a computer, isn't it?
Yeah, and the computer, I'm always aware to kind of use that as a metaphor, because I think actually, I think our own minds and the way that we function are probably far, far superior than computers themselves. But it is a very useful metaphor, I think. So it's ideal what you're saying. There's this sense of programming and kind of looking, if I was to extend that metaphor, looking at our mind as a motherboard and kind of seeing that connects to that, connects to that. And it's like trying to find where are the glitches? Because there's always some, there tends to be sort of deeper drivers that might be tripping ourselves up. And so to go back to that metaphor, where are the glitches in the system? Let me just kind of trim those and focus on, again, making more elegant the mental system so that I can perform at a higher level.
Without going kind of too deep into it, what do you think are the kind of causes of the glitches, or how? Because we all have, no one's perfect. We all have things we can improve about our personal performance and the way we operate. Is it our environment? Is it how we're brought up, the people that we're around, the things that we're told? What are there key things that form these kind of glitches that are kind of holding us back?
I'd say it's probably all of the things that you've just said. So there's a lot of conditioning that we carry within us. I often think we're kind of born into this world knowing a certain amount, and yet we don't know anything at all. And so we look to the people around us to kind of almost understand, who am I? And how do I need to function, on that basics of what do I need to do here in order to be okay? And so as we sort of move through life, there are certain things that we're told as we're growing up, either from the family unit, from friends, from teachers, from culture, from society. There's certain concepts and ideas that are sort of fed to us, and we take them on because they look like they make sense. We kind of see people around us and it's like, well, that's how we're supposed to do life because that's how the people around us are doing life. And so we kind of pick up these ideas of who we are and how we are meant to be. And a lot of it is to do with a very sort of basic survival, so that I'll be okay in this, so that I belong, all those kind of very basic drivers. And at one point in time, they serve a function, but it's just what I notice is we don't, unless we are consciously doing it, often as we're growing up through life, we're not realizing that I've got belief systems that I had when I was 5 years old or 7 years old that are still running even when I'm 30, 40, and so I'm a different person now than I was when I was 10 years old. Or so it seems. There are some kind of deeper drivers that still, or beliefs about who I am. So if I was to make this a little bit more concrete, if I think of, to give an example of people that I've worked with, so a single thought along the lines of, I don't belong, can be connected up to another single thought, I'm not good enough. So, and it really might be one moment in a person's life. It really might just be simply
when
one
you were
moment.
5 years old.
5 years old, 3 years old, where something happens that seems to teach you. This is a kind of a misunderstanding that we take on. One thing might happen that we then look at the concept, like the circumstances that we're in, and we might decide I don't belong, and that's quite a painful idea to take on as a truth. So then we look for, well, what's the reason? And somebody might then go, because I'm not good enough. So then you have these two completely separate, to go back to the mental map, two completely separate roads on the map suddenly meet. And then somebody is carrying that belief. And it becomes very deeply buried unconsciously through life. And it's, if you actually hang around that and stick with that belief of like, I don't belong because I'm not good enough, it's if you hold it as a truth, it's uncomfortable. It starts to feel like a costume that's really, really too tight. And if you really like hang around it for too long, it starts to become quite painful. And then what we then do is add on more kind of thinking to the thinking to try and get ourselves out of that trap that we found ourselves in the beginning. So that's when somebody might actually use a lot of force to kind of go, I'm going to disprove my own theory. I'm going to disprove this thinking that I made up in the first place. But if I become hugely, hugely successful, then that's proof that I belong.
Yeah.
And so, and I've worked with people who, this is the kind of game that they've played with themselves over the course of life. So then they become hugely successful, and they then have a world around them which is kind of, they're receiving lots of praise, lots of adulation, a lot of attention, and it kind of does look like they have disproved their own theory, but because they've still got this thinking of I don't belong because I'm not good enough running alongside of I clearly am good enough and I do belong and I'm a leader and everyone loves me, they then, because those two things, it's almost like two maps overlaid. So then the experience for that person is, well, I might be hugely successful, but I'm not very happy, or I don't feel fulfilled, or I can't really believe or feel this attention or love or praise, or it starts to have, again, they find themselves in pain again, because it's, as long as that story over here is still running as a truth for them, it doesn't matter how much success you achieve or how much wealth or...
an A-list celebrity at the top of your game and still feel that same feelings.
Yeah. And so, and I have had people coming to me who've been hugely successful, and this is the kind of story that I've heard. I actually did have somebody once say to me, I can't feel my life, because they'd become so numb. And they said, I have a wonderful life. I have, everything that on paper everybody kind of dreams about. But it kind of brings its own, I think it's far more painful than not really being successful. Because then they have a ton of guilt that they also pour into the pot, and so it really comes down to, can you actually look deep enough to uncover what is really driving you? If you want to be a hugely successful actor, if you want to be, what is the real driver that is motivating you? Because if it's an unhealthy driver, like I'm not good enough, therefore I must disprove this thought that I'm not good enough. That's the kind of picture that you could end up living further down the line.
Why do actors specifically come to you? What is it that they need? What are they searching for?
Initially, I tend to hear the word confidence a lot. People are wanting more confidence, and the context of that tends to be in a casting situation or networking situation. Performance anxiety comes up a lot when it tends to, they sort of feel like I'm in a high stakes situation. So again, casting, networking, or sometimes if it's like I'm doing a show and I've got some important casting person coming to see me or an agent coming to see me, so whatever they've kind of attached as or meaning they've attached to a certain context they find themselves in, and the meaning being it's high stakes. That's when people tend to sort of contract internally, and they tend to sort of say, I want more confidence in those moments. And I often say in response, I don't think it's necessarily confidence that somebody's needing, because I think that confidence is a result, it's not a requirement. So we sort of have confidence because we've done the thing we didn't think we could do, or said the thing it was uncomfortable to say, and so it's almost in hindsight we look back and go, gosh, that was okay actually. I didn't collapse, or I didn't die, or whatever it is that. is in our kind of, irrational thinking. And so people kind of go, all right, now I feel more confident. What we're tending to want in those moments is more courage. So it's sort of about recognizing if I'm in a situation that is unknown. So if I'm going into a casting situation, I don't know what's going to happen at the other side of the door. Perhaps I need a little bit of courage just to be able to meet the unknown. And with that,
battle with fear.
yes, and so it's kind of like a changing your relationship with fear, because the point of the unknown is there is going to be some fear to it, like with it, because it's unknown. So it's a little bit like becoming okay with fear and not sort of feeling like I have to run the opposite direction or suppress it or control it. It's just kind of accept. Well, that tells me I'm sort of probably in a space of growth, actually, probably in a space where something a bit more interesting is going to happen. If I can just recognize, is this okay? This is natural. It's just my mind is kind of going, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And to bring a little bit of courage to that is probably very useful. So that tends to be the most common, and anxiety as well, around sort of being able to manage or control anxiety, or those are the phrases that I tend to hear. I think often, though, running underneath a lot of these conversations, there's a wider conversation which is about power. And that's not what people tend to sort of talk about or phrase, but when you scratch the surface a little bit, it tends to be a little bit around, I feel powerless in this industry. Or like I'm having to face, so I hear the word gatekeepers a lot. There's gatekeepers that I'm having to get past.
That's kind of that's like a block that you're almost putting up yourself, though, right?
Yes. Yeah, so this is why I say how you see the world is what is shaping your experiences of the world. So whatever idea you have, the person who is kind of going into battle in a casting, and there's a lot of actors out there who are doing that. There's like, I've got to beat, so I've got to win this, or I've got to, it's like they've got power over me, so I need to try and dominate, and whatever it is. This isn't a conscious thing, by the way. This is sort of the deeper narrative that someone is often, that I see an actor is often telling themselves. There is something that I need to survive. There is a fight, there's a battle, and I do need to survive it. And people talk about surviving the industry, and all of that is actually deeply unhealthy.
Yeah.
I think the more valuable conversation maybe is like, what has to happen for me to be able to thrive in this business, rather than it being a surviving thing. Because that's so much about crumbs and just, and that tends to be born out of I'm not good enough thinking. But if you can go into a room and there's a human being in front of you, they just happen to be called a casting director, it's much more of a level playing field and much more interesting, I think, to kind of just meet the person in front of you.
And half the time you don't know who that person is, but your perception of them is they are the gateway, they do hold the power, they are, and that's when you start building the blocks and making yourself feel not good enough. Yeah. Tony Robbins, we were just talking about him, he says you can take any kind of issue that someone has down to two things: either they're not good enough or they don't feel loved enough. Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on that? Because it kind of seems the things that we're talking about rolls back to not feeling good enough.
Yeah, and actually that's come up quite a bit. There's a certain number of actors that I've worked with in different contexts. I do sort of group workshops as well as one-to-one. And people can suddenly discover that the reason they're acting is because they don't feel loved enough. And they're believing that if they become successful, then they will be loved. That can be a painful realization, actually, for somebody when they kind of meet that in themselves. Because often, that's somebody who they look around, they go, but wait a minute, I actually do have a lot of love in my life. You know, my parents, siblings, friends, partner, whatever. It's not really that somebody isn't loved, but it's more about what they are believing to be true about themselves, which again is probably come from a deeply historical pattern. And it might have just been one moment again where it just felt like I didn't get the love that I wanted in that sort of childish or, you know, childlike way when we were very, very young. And that can kind of stick. And so it's an illusion, but it's an illusion that can feel very, very real and compelling when it's running as a program in our minds.
So to kind of evolve and progress and be successful in your career, you really need to address much deeper evolution within yourself and what's going on and your makeup. Is that what you find with people? Because that's kind of the testimonials and what people say when they've been coached by you. Mm-hmm.
I do notice that is what happens. Yeah. So I'm always focusing on who this person is, you know, and I think in terms of evolution, it's inevitable. We are all evolving day to day to day, and that is life. I think, you know, it's like people say, the older you get, the wiser you get. And we also have this ability to slow it down through our ego. You know, our ego comes in and can be the very thing that blocks our own evolution. So yeah, I notice that as a pattern, evolving who somebody is being tends to actually evolve their ability to act. And it's sort of been like a happy side effect for a number of clients. They've sort of gone, I didn't really think this would make me a better actor in terms of I can look at scripts now and make more interesting choices, or I'm kind of seeing things in scripts that I didn't see before. And I think that's because there's a way of seeing that I'm kind of working on with my clients. There's a way of noticing that when you kind of scratch beneath the surface, I mean, I do spend a long time with clients just to help them kind of just notice what is going on in this moment, what is actually really here, what is occurring, can you notice what's occurring within your own thinking right now in this moment? Can you notice what's occurring in the other person that you're with? Can you meet the other person that you're with beyond the story of who you think they are? Can you open to being seen beyond the story of who you think you are? So it's a very it's kind of going very, very deeply into the present moment. And I think this is what we call presence. And it's very compelling. When you meet somebody who just has real presence, it's very, very compelling. And I think the more that you can kind of be with the person who's in front of you and less concerned about what's happening within you, there's a greater chance that you are going to progress, whether you're an actor or you're whatever it is in life. There's a greater chance, I think, because it's like being able to evolve beyond this self-centered perspective and into serving the person that I'm with, or serving. Actually, I like to go beyond that and kind of think serving the moment itself. What does this moment actually need? What is being asked of you and I in this moment? And when you can sensitize yourself to that, because that's, I think, what a lot of the work is that I'm doing. I'm kind of helping somebody really deeply sensitize themselves. And we can only, to reality itself, we can only really do that once we get a much deeper understanding of our own thinking, because we're always looking through this veil of thought. We're always kind of looking, it's like this kind of veil in front of me that is until you've really looked at it, it can feel like this is a brick wall. What I'm believing to be true is just true. It's just fact. And the more that you can actually really question your own thinking, because I notice that's what people don't necessarily do. We have judgments, but it's quite rare that we judge our own judgments. We just kind of consider our judgments as fact.
And where they came from. And,
yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, somebody might look at me in a certain way, and it's like, that must mean that means they hate me. You know, that's kind of like and it's irrational when you start to really look at it. But when you're living inside it, as if it's, you know, like a costume, and the costume almost becomes your skin, and you've forgotten this is a costume. It's almost impossible to see this is an illusion. And so people do get caught up in these little funny little moments of like what they're believing to be true about the world, but they're forgetting that they're the ones that are making that up in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's like we're all magicians creating illusions inside our minds, but we've also got somehow, for some reason, there's amnesia there in the system, and we've forgotten that we're the magician. So we just see the illusion as if it's real. And it's a little bit like if you and I were in an old Victorian music hall, you know, one of those old theatres, and we're watching the magician cutting the woman up, sawing the woman in half, and everyone around us is loving it because it's like, wow, what a wonderful trick. But you and I are screaming and like shouting murder, and somebody screamed, you know, call the police, and because we think somebody in front of us is being killed. Whereas everyone else around us is like, no, it's an illusion. He's a magician. But this is kind of what happens in our minds. We create these thoughts. We think that they're fact, they're truth, and then we behave accordingly. Whereas thinking is always it's always just I'm making meaning of the world. That's it. It's like it's a narrative. It's a constant narrative that is needed so that I can orient myself, so that I know this is a table, this is a chair. I don't have to constantly go, what is this? I don't know what this is. So I can look at a chair and I know how to use it because I learnt that one time in my life. But if I didn't have that system, I would always be looking around the world going, I don't know how to function. So we need
that kind of fight or flight part of the brain.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, thank goodness I could. But if you actually do stop and look at your mind for long enough in a day, you'll just see constant naming, and also constant questioning. It's like your mind will open a loop with a question, and then it will work really, really hard to close the loop to find an answer. And that's all that's happening all the time. Chair, table, you know, and am I okay? Am I okay? You know, that's an often very deep question. Am I okay here? Am I okay here? Am I okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Okay, relax.
Do you think once people start to understand this concept, and you know, I've been through it, and I kind of know it's very kind of freeing to suddenly realise you're not your thoughts, you know, and to suddenly have that awareness. But how long do you think it takes for you to get to the point where you are more, you're aware of it more consistently? Because it's easy to kind of forget that and get drawn back into it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think it's a slightly tricky question in terms of it depends on somebody's approach. And I think the answer to that is more to do with how disciplined you're going to choose to be. So when I'm working with somebody, they can have this really deep insight into, you know, what we're talking about here, and they suddenly really see it clearly. Oh my goodness, I'm not my thoughts. My thinking is something that I'm doing, but it's not who I am. Someone can have a really profound insight, you know, as much as you can hear me say it, it can still be at that conceptual level. But when somebody really grasps what it is I'm saying in a deeply embodied way, that's massive. And then frequently the next question is, what do I do with that? Or how do I, you know, and I think the only answer really is to just keep remembering.
Yeah.
Because to also understand that you're going to forget it. You're going to fall asleep. It's like, you know, this is what we do physically. We go to sleep, we wake up. We go to sleep, we wake up. And it seems to me, metaphorically, this is also what we tend to do with everything that I'm talking about. It's like you can understand it, you can see it, and then suddenly you forget it, and you're in the midst of some internal drama, and it all feels very real. And it's just really about how quickly are you going to catch yourself. And for that, it's really about being disciplined. You know, the person, you can be really disciplined and set up all kinds of systems around you. You know, I've done this myself when I was really first getting into all this work, just writing Post-it notes, just having little reminders on my phone, you know, just constantly remembering, you know, just having it like a message at home going, remember who you forgot you are. You know, just like that's the first thing that I see in the morning. Not so much now, but in the beginning, that was kind of what I was constantly doing, so because I knew I'm going to forget this.
And then the repetition, I guess, it's slowly...
And then it's the repetition. Yeah. And so it's almost like holding it as a new truth. Because I would also say to anybody who's watching this, don't believe a single word that I'm saying. Don't believe a single, because otherwise it just what I'm saying becomes another piece of dogma that's out there in the world. What I do invite anyone watching is to test. And that's how I've sort of progressed in my own life. That's how my clients have sort of progressed, is I'll frequently give clients little challenges and tasks to do, because I think there's so far you can go with understanding this stuff as a concept. I notice it takes a certain amount of action to really deepen the understanding. So sometimes when you get to see your own thinking, you get to see this is a belief that I had about this, you know, something that's going on in my life, this is what I'm believing to be true. Sometimes just shining a light in the dark is enough. And it will just kind of, you know, people just suddenly detach or let go of old thoughts that they had, because they realize, actually, that's not true for me anymore, and I'm kind of believing something. Sometimes that is enough. Just the seeing of it kind of dissolves it. But I notice there's deeper kind of levels of thinking that require something different, and they require people to take action in the world in a different way. So I'll often give clients challenges or tasks to do that will kind of raise their heartbeat a little bit, or make their palms sweat a little bit, because it's about leaning into your edge and kind of meeting the world as a playground and actually testing your own beliefs in a way that they start to crumble, you know, so if somebody thinks the world is against them, well, let's actually design some tasks and challenges to disprove that theory. Yeah.
Do you think actors should be kind of better prepared mentally for the world of acting? You know, could drama school be doing some kind of training on what we're talking about, something that's going to support actors and enable them to move forward, you know, better than we do? Yeah,
I do, and I think I kind of widen the net on that too, because I think it's almost just education in general. I think, you know, when I was growing up, I was taught an awful lot of content. You know, I think, look back on my education, I was taught an awful lot of, you know, subjects and the content and stuff, but I didn't really have anybody teaching me how to think. And I don't mean that in terms of philosophy. I'm actually meaning that much more in terms of mechanics and almost engineering. I take quite an approach to thinking, which is probably a bit more akin to an engineer. So I'm literally looking at how is somebody structuring that, how does it all fit together? And no one was ever really teaching me that until I stepped onto the road that I'm on and went and trained in the stuff I've been trained in. No one was really teaching me that. And that's such a powerful understanding. And I think, so to come back to drama school, yes, absolutely. I think there could really afford to be more sort of, because of the nature of the business, because the business is tough. And to go back to this sense of, you know, not having power, I think there is a truth in the fact that there are people who are making decisions, and you're not in the room when they're being made, when those decisions are being made. So just that, from an actor's point of view, just that fact can make somebody feel like, I don't have any power. Now that could be reframed so that they make a different kind of meaning of it, but let's remember that is a fact. There are certain decisions that are not going to be for you to be in there making, you know. And I think to have the kind of mental resilience to really to cope with that, to deal with that, to stay in the game is really, really important. And I think that for me and for a number of my friends, for a number of clients, that's been quite lacking from drama school training. As magnificent as the training can be in terms of skill sets and how to do the job of acting itself, I think there is a fundamental piece missing around mental well-being going into the industry.
What do you think acting is? Because this is something I think everybody, their view of it is everyone seems to be slightly different. You know, what part of our brains are we using? What level of consciousness are we going into to act? Because we are essentially having control over our mind, our thoughts, and our body when we do that, but letting go at that moment to be able to do it. And people, they're like, what is acting? You know, is it just being fake? I just wondered what your kind of thoughts were on that.
I worked with an actor once, and he had this amazing, and it was a real insight for him. It's funny when you kind of witness somebody else's insights, because they can sort of feel like nothing. But for the person who's actually having the insight at the moment, they feel like this, wow, this massive explosion has just gone on internally. And so what I'm about to say seems really, really obvious, but this actor suddenly said, acting is being. And it was like something went kaplunk inside. And I can absolutely see truth in that statement. So you know, when you were saying it's about, you know, faking, I actually think it's the opposite. I think it's about being, just that acting is being. And I have a view that I don't know how true this is. I don't really know how true anything is because of my understanding of perception. But this is what I like to think. This is how it seems to me, that on a deeper level, there is something within a person that wants to be expressed. And when you can really kind of tap into that, when somebody can get beyond the narratives of, I just need to work, I just need an agent, you know, all of that sort of, which is kind of at the top level. If somebody can actually let go of that thinking, and it's not about letting go of this is what I want, it's almost the opposite. Maybe I'll come back to that in a second, but to stick with your question, I think if we go deeper, for me it's a sense of there's something within your psyche, or there's something within the soul, perhaps, if you want to see it that way, that simply just wants to be expressed. And I don't know why. I don't think we need to even know why, but it's just in that moment. And that's why I kind of notice, I see this pattern quite a lot with clients, actor clients I've worked with, who have said, I've sort of drilled really deeply into why you're being an actor. And we've spoken about their dream job. What would you really, really love to do? And then they start to talk about the specifics of the kind of work, of the kind of roles, and then all of a sudden they show up. Those roles suddenly start, the more they tap into, this is what's really in this moment. It's not necessarily forever, but right now, I really want to play something really dark, or I really want to play something, you know, and then all of a sudden, the opportunity comes up, and it's like a moment of synchronicity. The more that they've actually hung around, this is what I really, because there's something I think deep inside that just wants to come out. And I think, you know, the Shakespeare quote, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. I think there's truth in that. But as actors, people have chosen to kind of go, I'm going to make this a living. I think probably out there in the real world, we're always just, we want to express, if we can really tap into it, it's like, what do I really want to express in this moment? Am I going to let that guide me? And when it stops becoming about needing a job or needing to get an award or needing to progress or needing to be successful, if you can tap into that, that's so much more powerful, because it almost feels effortless in terms of the doing of it. And so for me, I don't know if that's really true, what I've just said, but I kind of, when I look at things like typecasting or parts that people are drawn to, I kind of can see some truth in what I've just said. It's like, why are you drawn to that part? It's a little bit like, why are you drawn to the films that you like? Why are you drawn to the books that you read? There's something in you that feels like, I'm tapping into something that is true, that is uniquely me. It's like when I said a little earlier in this chat, we come into the world knowing an awful lot, even though we don't know anything. And it's like, can I return to that space of being that I was when I took my first breath? I have no recollection of that first breath, but I have a sense that I knew an awful lot. So what I'm talking about here is wisdom. It's not intellect. It's something that is so, so much deeper. And if I can tap into that and allow that to be almost like my compass, then I think you're onto something. Then I think you start to deliver performances that are quite incredible.
I had this question for a bit later on, but I think I'm going to come to it now, which is, the acting, as we say, it requires the ability to control the thoughts, the body, and the mind. And what you're talking about there almost feels like the soul. And so, it feels in itself spiritual.
Yeah, there's something that I look at an actor and I see, can you simply, or anybody who's creative, can you create yourself in a form that is simply a conduit? That's it. Can you create, sometimes I find myself saying to actors, your only job in a casting is to show up, be present, and let the moment organically unfold. That's it. It sounds like nothing, but if you really live into the words that I've just said, it's massive, because most people can't really be present. Because if you have any thoughts of needing anything in that moment, that's the veil through which you're going to be looking through. So can you really desire, can you really go in there going, I love this job, knowing if I don't get it, I'm still okay? Because the need tends to come from, I'm not okay if I don't get it. So then, because it's like I'm seeing myself as I'm not complete.
Yeah.
But I will be complete if you give me a job. If you go in there going, I'm so complete, I'm whole as I am, then you can be really present. So there is a sense of, for me, there is a sense of the spiritual about it, but it actually takes an awful lot of work. It takes a lot of discipline to just really form yourself so that whatever this is, this life, the mystery, can be expressed through you in the moment. Yeah.
Not what happened yesterday, 10 years ago, what's going to happen and what you want to happen in the future just now.
Yeah.
In this moment.
Yeah. And when you can carry that through, and not just, I'm talking about life, when you can carry that through your day, then that's deeply sensitive. That's somebody who is this really sensitized being. There's a W.B. Yeats quote that I love, which is, the world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper.
That's beautiful, isn't it?
It's beautiful, and again, I can kind of see truth in those words, because I've sort of, it's like I've used that. I read that quote some time ago, and I was so taken by it that I thought, what if I actually took that on as a principle? What if I lived into those words and made those words true for me? And so, in my own life, I can kind of, my own experiences of life are a testimony to Yeats's quote. It's like, if you can sharpen your senses, there's some really magical things that occur, and they come in the form of synchronicity. They come in the form of these unexpected happenings. They come in the form of, and when you actually live into that, it's like, it's far greater than what you can imagine, because what the mind can conceive is actually quite limited.
Yeah.
So even when people talk about dreams and visions, it's still quite limited in terms of what actually is possible. So that's why I say, if someone can actually escape, I don't know what Einstein said, but it's like the world is the mind is a wonderful servant and a terrible master. Most of us make it the master. And that's why I think most of us are living these half-lived lives. But if you can switch the equation around so that it becomes this wonderful servant, and you're using the whole of your system, there's incredible wisdom inside this body. If you can sensitize yourself and use the mind as like, I don't want to sort of gang up on the mind. I'm not somebody who believes like, oh, ego's a terrible thing. It's just like, we need it, we need it. But we need to be balanced. There's another quote that I'm just reminded, a Joseph Campbell quote, which I might be paraphrasing, but he said that a lot of people think we're looking for a meaning, or the meaning to life. And he said, I don't think we're looking for the meaning to life at all. What we're looking for is an experience of being alive. And I think that kind of runs across the board of people, not just actors. I think that's probably people. But I think maybe with people who are actors, they might have tapped into something there, which is like, I get to really feel alive, and it's possibly a combination of all the elements. You often hear people say, I love, even film actors, there's something special about theatre. There's something special about the live, because you've got this combination of I'm in it in the moment, anything could happen, even though I'm in the, it's rehearsed, we're still in the, you just don't know, something might happen, and then there's this there's an audience watching, all the elements of that create something which is very alive.
So this idea of being in the moment, the thing they talk about at drama school a lot is letting go once you actually go and do it, when you're on stage, or when they say action, and you do all this preparation, and we are working to control our thoughts, control our minds, control our bodies, and in that moment, let go. Where do we find the balance between that control and that letting go? It's I think that's a tough kind of seesaw for people to get in, and even throughout your training, sometimes people never get that balance.
I do see it as the inverse, actually.
Do you?
Yeah, I do, and I totally get where you're coming from, because I know when I was at drama school, the more that I heard that phrase "let go," because it's true, you hear that a lot, the more I'd hold on. And I would, in fact, sometimes I would, this was years ago, I would talk about letting go, and I would notice that every time I said the phrase let go, this is something actually to share. When we start to pay closer attention to what our physiology is doing, it can be very useful. It's almost like see yourself as, if you can become Sherlock Holmes with yourself, there's a lot of clues that we're kind of expressing in terms of what is happening internally in our own psychology. It's like we're giving ourselves away all the time. We just can't see it until we really get sharp with our focus. So I would use this phrase, I would say this phrase, letting go. And I would notice, excuse me, I would do this. Every time I would say let go, my hand would go like that. And one day I caught myself doing it, and it might be in a conversation like this. I'd say let go, and it was completely outside of my conscious awareness. And so I suddenly just stopped, and I looked at this fist that was really tight, and I just got really curious, and I was like, what is this fist wanting me to know? It sounds like an odd thing to say, but what, this hand knows something that this mind of mine doesn't. What does this fist want me to know in this moment? And in that moment, again, and it wasn't a conscious thing, my hand just went like that. And now it feels a conscious thing, but it was totally an unconscious action. My hand just went like that. And it was like I was suddenly able to see the concept of letting go in a completely different way. So I saw it as opening up. Because to me, the word let go felt like I'm holding on to something. And I didn't know what I was holding on to, first of all. but also I didn't know where I was going to if I did let go. So if you consider that as a metaphor, and I'm being quite literal in the metaphor, I didn't know what I was holding on. Am I holding on to a bar? Am I holding on to a ledge? And if I let go, how far am I going to drop? You know, and I don't know, is there a cushion? Is there something going to catch me? Am I going to break my legs? Am I going to actually die? You know, so it felt as dramatic as that within the concept of it. And so there's these two words that I've kind of created this whole metaphorical landscape in my mind around. And so when I actually looked at this hand and just realized letting go is opening, suddenly it felt an entirely different experience. And it didn't feel like I was holding on to anything in the first. It almost had the ease and the grace of a flower in spring, just coming through the ground and just opening its head to the sun. And if you look at nature and you see how easy that is, it's not effort, it's not fighting, it's not it just does that, and the sun goes and it closes up again. It's just like, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so to make it more practical, I then realized, well, opening up, there is a fundamental way of being that I need to take on in order to open up. And it was curiosity. I have an insatiable, I think I've always had it anyway, but I suddenly started to really pay attention to this insatiable curiosity that is within me. And I notice often when I'm with my clients, that's the one single differentiating factor between somebody that approaches me and it is my level of curiosity. So many people have kind of suppressed that, even actors, where you'd think they're going to be naturally curious people, because it's like, I'm studying text, I'm researching, I'm out there looking at people, but even actors can have sort of capped it because they've made other things important. They've made their own needs more important than that. But if you can actually make curiosity the thing that drives you, everything else falls into place. Suddenly you might become hugely successful, but it doesn't actually mean as much. It's lovely to enjoy it, but it doesn't mean as much as it did. I'm more curious about what you've got to say and I can hear myself saying stuff, and I don't really know what it is that I'm saying. I'm just kind of speaking, but I'm more curious about how this is landing in you than what it is that I'm saying, because my attention is all over you, so I can see how my words are kind of affecting you, and that to me is a much more interesting game than hearing what it is that I'm saying.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to watch this back and go, wow, is that what I said? Because I genuinely, I'm over there, my attention is over there with you. And I think for an actor, if you can embody that and take that into not just, I mention castings a lot because that's what people want to talk about, because that's where the challenges are, sort of actually booking the jobs, being in the room and doing the stuff they need to do in order to be given work. So that tends to often be the conversation. But this goes across to be in the rehearsal room. It's the job of acting itself to put everything over there on your fellow player, your fellow actor. If you can place all your attention there with some internal, I have some awareness of my own, how I'm feeling as we're speaking, but it's almost like I've trained myself to almost use that as feedback in terms of what's happening with you. It's not really feedback in terms of, I'm not really aware actually of what my internal mind is, the chatter. Yeah. I'm not really aware of chatter within me, but I'm very aware of what's occurring with you.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Really powerful. The nature of acting can be very, very frustrating and really tough to deal with. The constant effort to keep pushing forward through audition after audition. You do so much work for the roles without even knowing if you're going to get them. Trying to manage the unpredictable last-minute work schedules, that's the reality for a lot of actors. Are there any kind of words or thoughts that you can offer to kind of keep that positive spirit stay motivated and keep kicking no matter what is going on?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to really know why they're doing it. Which I don't think I'm saying anything new there, but maybe what I would offer is to go even deeper than I often notice that when people inquire into what's going on with them, they'll go a couple of levels down maybe, and then they'll go, okay, I've got an answer that satisfies. I might be a little extreme, I don't know, but I tend to kind of go 5, 6, 7 layers down. So to keep asking the question why of yourself, why am I really, really doing this? And until you find a reason that is compelling. I had a friend say to me recently, it serves to have a vision for yourself that you would kill for, which is quite extreme, that you would kill for or that you would die for. And I just thought, wow, that's interesting. And I kind of hung around that myself. And I thought, it is interesting what that does for you, because I can kind of, I found a vision or a mission for myself that I could attach those words to. When you actually do find it, it's like, wow, that's really powerful. Now, that's not to say you're going to go out there and actually kill people, or that you really would want to die for it. But if, like, as a principle, to have that internally as this is what I'm doing. Now, it might be that somebody discovers they're acting for a reason that it's an entirely different reason than they previously thought. It's a little bit like with me when I realized I'm coaching, acting, it's all part of the same thing, because my passion is transformation. And actually, my real game is evolution. I'm really I just get so deeply passionate about helping the person in front of me evolve. So I know that's my why. That's my intent. That's what I'm doing, is helping people evolve themselves to a form where there's the potential for them to create their great work. Now, it doesn't have to be necessarily one piece of work, but it's just like to be able to create at that level. That's my that propels me out of bed every morning to be part. It's a little bit like I view it that I am meeting creativity itself. It's massive. And I think if an actor, to go back to your question, if an actor can drill down into why am I being an actor, and find not necessarily to mirror the words that I've just said, but to maybe even find their own version of what it is that I've just said, that taps into something greater than themselves. Because for me, everything that I've just said in terms of what I'm doing, it does feel like devotion. It feels like I'm devoting myself to something which is greater than me. It's just like it's like I'm a servant to creativity.
Real sense of purpose.
Yeah, it's a real sense of purpose. And I think when somebody can find their own purpose, whether they're an actor, whether they're an accountant, whether they're a teacher, whatever it is, it's hard to think of an accountant having purpose, but actually I've met a few accountants, and they can talk. Some of the people I've met, they can talk in a way, it's like, wow, I just thought it was just numbers on it, but it's, when you listen to somebody who talks from a sense of purpose, it's really powerful. And so for an actor, if they hear somebody say no 20 times in a week, it's like, okay, it's a bit, all right, but keep going. Because when you can come from a place of purpose, a no is just a no.
It's the immediate meaning that you associate with it. So it's,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's nothing. And actually, whether you come from a place of purpose or not, I'm still going to use that statement. A no is just a no. It's just coming from a place of purpose allows you to really to play the long game. And to stay in those, so that you can get to the end of a week and you might have had so many no's in that week, and it's like, okay, next week. But it's when we make a no mean something so personal, They said no because I'm not good enough. They said no because I'm ugly. They said no because my CV isn't big enough, or whatever it is that we're saying. And actually, some of that might actually be true. Maybe they did say no because your CV wasn't the right CV. But you don't need to get hung up in that story, Because to go back to what I was saying about my theory of the psyche just wanting to express itself through you, through the act of acting, if that's true, then your work will find you. If that's true. I think also, though, to add something to that, we need to have the sensitivity to know my work has just found me, to not let it bypass us. So many fascinating things have happened in my life that have come through very strange, windy paths. And if I'd said no to some things along the way because it didn't look how it's supposed to look, then the great things that came at the end of that windy path would never have come. But often what we play a game in life of success should look this way. So we're waiting for that. We've decided what life should look like and how us in the successful frame should look, and we're therefore trying to create that. And that's also an illusion. And in doing that, if we're just scanning for that constantly, we might actually be missing the great success that is coming our way, because we go, well, that's not how it should look. To kind of try and tie a few things together in this conversation, if you remain childlike with your curiosity, then you won't miss the great opportunities that are out there for you, because you're constantly just going to be so much wider and deeper with your perspective on the world, because you're willing for anything to happen. You kind of meet the world in this state of grace and purpose and kind of preparation, which is a little bit like watching a dog ready to pounce because somebody's going to throw the ball. It's alive. It's really alive. But you don't kind of get a sense that the dog's, anxious that it won't get the ball. It's just like
exciting.
Yeah, it's just like ready to go. If you can meet the world in that state, then the world, what you meet in the world, reflects that state. And that's a magical state of being. Therefore, what you experience will feel magical.
That's very clear. Very good. Thank you, Anna. It's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.